Well, hello everyone. It's Martin Lush here from NSF Health Sciences. A warm welcome to this very short 10-minute webinar on how people and organisations behave in a crisis. Not only how, but also some real practical solutions, what we call our 5 to drive solutions with regard to one specific area, which is errors and mistakes. So, first and foremost, I sincerely hope, this is our agenda, sincerely hope that all of you are safe, sound and staying sane in these rather challenging conditions. I'm Martin Lush, Global VP for NSF Health Sciences. Many of you would know me before from the various webinars that I've done, so it's great to link up with you once again. One thing I really want to focus on in this environment where there's a considerable amount of pressure, considerable amount of stress, and with it distraction, that creates an environment, not just at work but also at home, which is extremely error risk. So, there's a great probability, great risk that human errors, mistakes will increase during these very, very challenging times. And what I want to do in the next 10 minutes is to give you some very practical solutions with regard to how you investigate those errors, but importantly, how you prevent those errors from happening. Please stay in contact. This is just a short, sharp introduction to the subject with some practical tools, but please drop me an email if you need any more reference papers, any more tools, any more techniques, or indeed if you have any thoughts or ideas, please just drop me an email so that we can then share them with others interested in this subject. During a crisis, during any unplanned event, there's considerable amounts of distraction, not just distraction through changes in working environment, but more importantly, mental distraction. Everybody during this challenging time is worried about family, they're worried about changes to their routine, they're worried about how this event will end. So all of that distraction creates an error-rich environment, which then makes that crisis grow and potentially makes that risk even greater. So what I want to do is to share with you our 5 to drive, those very practical solutions, those simple tools and techniques that you can take away from this and hopefully apply. So I'm going to cover each one of these in overview. And please drop me a line, drop me an email if you want a further explanation of any of these. The first one, what I call find your true north. What I mean by this is find your reference points. So when people make errors and mistakes, particularly in these challenging times, remember these 3 things. Firstly, people do the best they can with what they have available to them at that time. Also remember that human error is the starting point of your investigation, the starting point of your review, rarely its conclusion. And lastly, please remember that human error is the consequence, very rarely the cause of a particular error or mistake, and more so now than ever before with the added pressure, the added anxiety, and the added stress that COVID-19 is putting on us all. So when you're looking at either error investigation or error prevention, just remind yourself of your true north. Just remind yourself of these 3 key points. Number 2 is think, error, change. So when somebody makes a mistake, that is very much the tip of the iceberg, if you like. That's the surface of the problem. And just remember that it's being preceded by what we at NSF call multiple contributing factors. There is an error chain that precedes that mistake or that procedural non-compliance. Right at the bottom of that chain, that relates to culture and leadership. In the middle of the chain, the contributing factors can be related to overcomplicated processes, disconnected systems, over complex procedures. And then finally, right at the surface of the problem, you find people making those mistakes, making those errors, but it's a consequence of what has come before, what we call this error chain. So when you're doing an error investigation, just remind yourself that the people, if you like, on the surface, the people engaged in that problem are doing the best they can with what they have been given to them, if you like, the error chain underneath. And the job of the investigation is to get as far down that error chain as you can in order to prevent that mistake from happening. Number three is focusing very much on simplification, because simplification, even in the pre-COVID environment, was survival, and simplification is going to be even more important when we emerge from this pandemic. The COVID-19 challenges, it doesn't take me to really re-emphasize these, because this is what each one of us is experiencing at the moment. We have the stress, we have the added anxiety, we have the added pressure, and that creates a level of cognitive overload, where our brains are focusing or trying to think about so much, both at work as well as at home, that it simply can't cope. We have fewer people, many of us. We have new routines and ways of working that we're being asked to follow, even though our brains are wired for those old processes, those old procedures, if you like, those same old habits. And then finally, we have all of us the same systems that we were using before, usually overcomplicated systems, that we're now being asked to use, even though we have fewer people to operate those systems and follow those procedures. You put all of that together, you have an error-rich environment, whether it be overcomplicated SOPs, our change management system, overcomplicated batch records, all designed for the pre-COVID environment, where we are now with all of the changes, fewer people, social distancing. It makes it even more challenging to follow those old ways of working, and in doing so, it creates a significant increase in the level of errors and mistakes that we're all going to make. I want to give you one very, very quick, simple tool and technique, what I call the accelerated simplification. So we take SOPs as an example. We all know our SOPs are overcomplicated. We all know that 80% of the SOPs are relatively unimportant compared to the 20% that really do matter. We all know that most companies actually survive off shortcuts, which is when operators or users of procedures or systems are forced to take shortcuts. So this is what you just need to do, just 6 simple steps. Number one, identify the SOP in need of simplification. Use a risk-based approach for that. Place those SOPs in what I call a social or informal area. Obviously, it's not where people are all meeting up these days, but certainly allow individuals to look at those SOPs with a highlighter pen and ask them to highlight the steps you actually follow. You then ask them to put them in almost like a post box. In other words, this is done anonymously. And then you look at the SOPs that you get back through this process. And what you're going to find is SOPs with virtually no highlighter pen, or SOPs with only 20% of the text highlighted. In other words, the bits people actually follow. And then you look at those and redesign the SOPs around the highlights. Obviously, there's an element of risk assessment to do this, ladies and gentlemen, because you might be concerned by what you actually see. And then finally, once you've rewritten that SOP, once you've refocused the SOP around the 20% that actually people follow, make sure you protect what you have created, that simplified version of the SOP. So I hope you found that short, sharp introduction to accelerated simplification useful. This is just one part of our short, sharp webinars to help you through this challenging time. Here's our program for what remains. And lastly, thank you very much for listening. Hope you found it useful. Please visit our library for simplification resources. There's a whole lot more there for you. And if you have any more additional questions, please do not hesitate to drop me a line on this email address. Stay safe, everyone.